keep in mind this strict locality. The computed apple has a brighter or more brilliant appearance than a somehow made apple on your breakfast table. Real biological apple, in difference to ray-traced apples, underlie the Murphy's law. Nothing is perfect. Ray-tracing apples are perfect, and eatable apples, or apples are perfect, we could say. Biologic apples are not so perfect. And on the other hand, you have radiosity. This is a very complicated, recursive mathematical algorithm. Radiosity was not developed for computer graphics, but for the most critical problem of ballistic rockets when they re-enter the atmosphere. They have been out in the vacuum and now they come back to the air, and for the rocket the air is resistance as water is for us. Yeah? And resistance, in the case of humans, or friction, or armies, or cars, resistance produces heat. And the radiosity equation in the originally has a function to calculate the heat in the warhead of the re-entering rocket. That is, to calculate the risk for the astronauts when they come back. They shouldn't be frittered like pommes frites. And then radiosity as a great mathematical tool can be transported from one domain of this Earth to another domain, and so radiosity was applied to computer graphics because as heat diffuses into the metallic or crystallic warhead of the rocket, so light, that is the sun, comes through our windows and so on, and produces, as I said yesterday, this light is, in radiosity, light is regarded as a whole window, not as a light ray, one linear light ray, but as a light field, so to say, a field which colors whole walls and ceilings and floors and seats and tables, and these tables and mirrors reflect this light or let through this light coming from outside into this room, into this system. And it goes on recursively, and all the walls and the mirrors in the room play with another. I hope it's my description is poetic enough that you see what happens. And finally, after some 1,000 recursions, the virtually rendered room looks almost like a photograph of the room, and the specific, and the power of radiosity is to render this global effect of windows and sunshine, and not just a single line of light. Ray tracing, as the name says, traces the path of one recursive ray. It's a line, and radiosity is as I said, a field. And now local versus global, point versus surface. Does it remind you of something you learned on high school? Perhaps I leave it as a little riddle because I have to stop right now and start the break. I have some difficulty to come back into this shadowy room after so much sun in so few minutes. So I almost forget the riddle I posed, forgot what I remember, and it was obviously a mathematical riddle. Surface, point, line, and so. Anybody has a solution on the difference between ray tracing and radiosity? I think the answer is rather elementary. Newton and Leibniz were not always enemies, but allies in developing both sides of the calculus, differentiation and integration. And the ray tracer is a kind of graphical differentiation of a three-dimensional virtual world, and radiosity is an integration of the same world. And that's why ray tracing is much more suited for outdoor scenes, and at least at the origin, radiosity, no, still today, radiosity is limited to indoor scenes, rooms and the like, because to integrate over your whole field of view, outdoors, on the side of some ocean or in the high mountains, like Saas-Fee, would be a rather heavy task, even for computers. So differentiation is always much cheaper than integration. Cheaper not in the sense of dollars and euros, but cheaper in the sense of computational effort. And only with computers this very term of computational effort can be strictly defined in the days where the word computer meant persons, and above all female persons. It depended heavily on rand conditions, but now on the computer conditions, this cost of programs can be more precisely measured. And this is maybe the appropriate place to remember Andrei Andreevich Markov the Younger and great Kolmogorov from this Soviet Academy of the Sciences, Akademia Nauk. This is my last remaining Russian in my tongue. Nauka is genitive plural of sciences. Science. I want to convey the message that not all breakthrough in computer mathematics have been made on the western side of the Iron Curtain, even under Stalin, and after Stalin's death, some very deep-laying problems were risen and solved by people like Kolmogorov. Every summer in his vacancies, he went to the sunny mountains of the Calculus and took a canoe in these wide rivers of the mountains, and he or they, some friends in this canoe, put it away their clothes in this solitude and went down the river with high speed, and during the time, this whole speed ride, they recited the Odyssey by road in Greek. Okay. And the final technical output of these great Russian computer scientists was a machine called Elbrus. Elbrus is the highest mountain of this very Caucasus. Caucasus, probably you'd say. So to see the relation between this machine and Kolmogorov. And this was so incredibly powerful that after the decline of communism or socialism, Intel Corporation got wind of this computer architecture, and somehow by more or less clean means, the secrets of this machine came to Santa Clara. And Pat Gelsinger tried to overcome the limits of Intel's own old-fashioned architecture and planned a perfect computer system called Titanium, after Titanium and after the Titans. But this was an economic failure. After this short introductory remarks, I come to my proposal for the third and last day. After so many stories about his history, the task is up to speak of today, these very years, and to speak of the near foreseeable, almost foreseeable future. This is difficult because oracles, if not given by goddesses, go usually wrong. Today, computers are not just visible machines on desktops and on labs also, and in your hands, palms, like the company. Computers are ubiquitous, and for instance, this is not a simple instance, it's a rather typical element of nowadays Western Europe or the European Union, that computers are all present in cars and planes and what have you. A German company, Bosch, is or was the worldwide leader in computerizing first-class cars like BMW or Mercedes and so on. Last information I got, inside one machine, one car, there were about 200 little small hidden computers, so-called embedded computers, not visible to the car driver, but helpful in cases of accident and almost every other complexity and situation. And my information I have from Bosch company is outdated, and I would guess about some 400 embedded computers in a first-class car of today. And the technical difference between Boeing and Airbus Toulouse is the higher degree of computerization on the European side. And the first test pilots in the sky over Mulhouse, I think they died by an accident. Yeah, I might. Thank you, Mr. Hofstein. They died because the Airbus can be steered, controlled by its board computer alone, without human intervention. I don't know whether Boeing planes are nowadays as far advanced, but what we should reckon with this possibility. I don't tell you the German-French prehistory of Airbus and the Concorde and so on. This would be a history of technology and warfare, not a history of computing. And I mentioned in passing the fact that the computerization of nuclear plants is a very risky enterprise, and that the nuclear plants were responsible enough to await sure, secure algorithms and operating systems. But all these facts and phenomena pose by themselves almost the question, how come, as ever? What are the structural reasons of this ubiquity, which ubiquity as a term was, since the Middle Ages, one of the classical attributes reserved solely to the Christian God, all power, all presence, and so on. The answer I prefer, and I'm not alone in doing so, would be that in computer technology there's a rather close and strong feedback loop between computing power or machinery on the one hand, and solid state physics on the other hand. Hopefully you know what solid state physics means. The physical analysis of metals and half metals or gases and not gases on an atomic or even subatomic scale. By feedback loop, I mean the following coupling. Only by computers of the existing generation, but far better computers than we can buy, physicists are able to advance deeper and deeper into the atomic structure of some given element, be it silicon or plumb or iron. And this deeper knowledge that comes out of the computer's output can be turned around and put to the advantage of the next computer generation. Yeah? And next computer generation is by definition more powerful and will enter nature, Mother Nature, still more deep. And this is the spiral I try to describe. And I come back to this progress or this recursion. So don't ask me too soon, too hastily. We could sum up this little story by saying it in a more ontological way, and I have been bitten in the book during the breakup to become ontologist again. We could formulate, by computers, nature reflects herself. But I don't, for many reasons, I just hate the term reflection, and in philosophical sense it's not I like it in optical context. And so I'd better say, more closer to my feelings, in computers, nature is enabled to, by computers, nature is enabled to look into her own eyes. This may sound a little bit crazy, but I guess that certain computers, mainframe computers, middleware, and so on, knew already yesterday morning that today there will be sunshine and no cloud. And you know that weather reports are done by computers and then propagated by television and nice people, but the people are not the weather foreseers, but the computers. And you don't know that some years ago in Italy, the weather prophets, the human weather prophets, even appeared on the screens as Hellenistic goddesses, that is, they had no clothes on their body. But apart from this joke, which should remind you of the dangers and caveats of anthropomorphisms. And of stereomorphism for villagers, it was the so many words with Guineas change. It was a cock who every morning announced the coming weather. But so apart from all biology, let me come back to physics. And two names have to be mentioned. One is known to you, the other not. John von Neumann is on your mind, and he wrote the first and fundamental paper on computer as beings able of reproducing themselves, and not only able of self-reproduction, but also of self-optimization. This is a paper from the late 40s, and it works under incredibly idealized conditions. This theorem, all the needed equipment must be co-present to the robot who assembles its children or its better versions, but this was just a theoretical model, and now in the closed loop between solid state physicists as scientists and computer engineers as technicians, and this all has been somehow realized. The role of humans in this process is difficult to assign, and the role of self-action of computers is equally difficult, and we won't go into percentages. This would be stupid journalism and not worthy of our attention. But what is it that makes computers and/or solid state physics so powerful? I think the answer has been given by another Nobel Prize man, Richard and Feynman. He died from cancer and worked for the Caltech at San Diego, I think. Yeah?
I think so.
Yeah. And he was a funny man, very close to his students. He was a pop fan, a bongo player, and probably he was a kiffer. And among his many exploits, he unmantled the secret of the Challenger catastrophe. Before I go into his computer science part, let me simply tell you the story as far as it has been told to me. This Challenger rocket had to be launched some sunny day. But the committee deciding the conditions, the weather conditions of the launching day, this committee consisted of about a dozen management people and just one engineer. And this was what Feynman dismantled. And the managers followed Ronald Reagan's desire to have launched the rocket under any condition, even that condition, the condition of very bad weather. And the engineer protested, and this was no help. And so the people, the astronauts, had to die. So he was not only a bongo player, Feynman, but he did, in my eyes, he wrote the best book on physics, 3 volumes, lecture on physics by Richard M. Feynman. Easy to buy, available still today, because brilliant. In an article I just heard about, I didn't read the paper, Feynman asked his colleagues, the other physicists, why are you so interested in stars and galaxies and almost infinitely big things? And why spend you or your state billions of dollars or euros in order to reconstruct the very first microseconds of this known universe, Big Bang, as they studied it, as they simulated it, just right now in Geneva. Why is your thought so monstrously big? Why isn't it simple and small? Why go you out into the first seconds of the universe instead of going deep into matter? And so solid state physics became an honorable title as a twig, as a branch of research. And out of Feynman's genial prediction came powerful technical and at the same time scientific beings or procedures or research methods, difficult to distinguish between these things. I hope you have read anywhere in your newspapers or magazines that nano-physics is nowadays the answer to Feynman's question. Nano-physics isn't just a very deep description of electrons and their passive, in the sense of Feynman passive, but nanophysics is at the same time nanotechnology. You play around with subatomic particles, because you can play around with subatomic particles photons, electrons, and so on. Because Gerd Binning from IBM Rochlitz here in Switzerland, Gerd Binning got his Nobel Prize for the invention of the grid electron microscope. German working at Rochlitz in Switzerland. And I happen to know one of Binning's students, now professor himself, for nano-physics, obviously, of course. And he told me, this hacker, that Binning used to say to his students, I just invented again, or I just reinvented Edison's gramophone needle. It's a bit more complicated, but not. I don't need to go into details. And in fact, it's some very tricky scanning of atomar surfaces for subatomar, that is, electrical effects. Sometimes it's better to visualize what this powerful microscope allows to perceive. And in other cases, it's much more better to sonify what the needle gets as info. And this former student of Binning has demonstrated us both possibilities, and it was absolutely convincing that the sometimes propagated so-called superiority of optics over acoustics is a sheer myth. Our ears detect on different structures from our eyes. The eyes are powerful in this regard and poor in that regard, and for the ears it's just the other way around. If I may, for the last time, mention Hermann von Helmholtz. It was his insight in the middle of the 19th century. This color and sound are complementary aspects of the world as we love it. Okay. What I said may explain that computers and as universal discrete media have swallowed all other media or are on their way to swallow them in the near future. With swallowing, I don't mean that there are no phones around anymore, but this phone is no phone in the traditional Humphrey Bogart sense, but it has become itself a computer, and other and voice over IP is another form where you even don't see some telephonic device, but it functions inside your desktop just like telephony. Or think of of the battle that Andy Groves from Intel Corporation some 20 years ago called the battle of the eyeball, or for the eyeball. He predicted for the near future that television monitors would overtake TV monitors. I take overtake in the sense to it given by a famous quote from Alan Turing, that computers someday in the future will overtake us. I heard about Andy Groves' statement, and in a public address for the ZDF, the Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen. This is still a state-owned, virtually a state-owned television station in difference to private stations. And I quoted Groves and Intel Corporation 15 years ago, and they declared me crazy. The TV makers higher level. And now the prophecy has become so obvious and true that it's almost a loss of time to discuss it anymore. So I skip the question of Amazon and Apple and electronic books and just underline the inherent dangers of this swallowing. No, before I should say one sentence, why I don't like, why I dislike the term new media in the plural sense. This is for journalists and users a rather useful metaphor to describe the phenomenon, but only the phenomenon of the ubiquity of computers, new media in many new media. But in truth, it's just one single medium, the computer in its infinitely many forms, that is the new medium. New in regard to all human or natural life forms and culture forms. And only after having said this, I may add that there are some risks. For instance, some libraries or museums are inclined to digitalize all their contents, books or pictures or statues, and in the second step throw away the books and the pictures and the paintings and the statues. I won't say that this is forbidden because it's a vandalism or barbarism, which is certainly is, but I would rather warn against this tendency by understressing the risks of digitalized storage media. By obvious means, it's impossible to simulate long-term future. We can't experimentally test the Bluetooth disks, whether or not they will be correct in 200 years, or CD disks have a certain tendency to die after 10 years or so, and 10 years is rather short-term the life. And the first book we have from the Egyptian desert in the Western world are from 400 before, and still readable and present for our culture, Greek or even Egyptian hieroglyphical texts. Older than 400, I think, in the case of the Egyptian papyri. So, and a second reason against destroying the things reproduced is that reproduction up to now only regards the physical side of things. What is not taken into account is the chemical side of everything. And physics and chemistry, to my layman's knowledge, only become one science at the subatomic level or the atomic level, and this level is not reached by our technologies of reproduction, digital reproduction. So there may be some important chemical ingredients in, let's say, Raphael's paintings that will only be discovered in 100 years and could not be discovered when the paintings were destroyed. These are hopefully all these remarks and warnings are not naive and obvious to you, but hopefully they help you to formulate your own questions. Now, after giving so many reasons for the incredible growth of computer technology since Alan Turing 36 or 5 even, let's make up a mathematical model for all this. Let's hear about a mathematical model for all this. I hopefully truthful observer and reader and transmitter. Gordon Moore, another of the three founding fathers of Intel, risked in, I think in 65, a prophecy. He extrapolated from very few existing data. He extrapolated from, I think, 6 or 5 years of computer development into the next 50 years. And this extrapolate by this, and for this 5 or 6 years, he saw a certain mathematical law underlying the growth of computer technology, measured simply in hardware power and transistor number. Yeah? No qualitative measure of how near to humans, or how brilliant, or how beautiful, or how soundful and effective. Just in sheer number of transistors and on a certain CPU chip. Nothing else, nothing more complicated, but by this very empirical. It was very empirical. write on this law, and I give my personal definition of language. And I've seen the USA only by glimpses, and last time 13 years ago, but allow me as an admirer of Intel Corporation to utter the feeling that after the decline of the industrial decline of the East Coast and Detroit car industry, in my probably blind eyes, the only remaining industrial power resides in Exxon and Intel company, and this is a sad fact to state. And it's no, don't make a note out of this silly, stupid sentence. Please. Oh. Cross it out and say instead that if you compare between Exxon and Intel is certainly the more innovative company because they are concerned with the future, and Exxon with fossil past. And so we come back to Gordon Moore, M-O-O-R-E, and his famous law. This would be somehow 1960, and this would be 2010, and this would be the observer's point of Gordon Moore, 1965, and this would be the law, some constant A or C times E, Euler's constant, power x. And this looks like to reformulate it, this function, this mathematical function, this exponential function in more human form, more formulate it like this. Roughly speaking, a computer power increases in 18 months from to the double power, but as was as interests in the economic sense. You see, I'm not good in questions of money making. A seemingly small percentage tends to increase to incredible dollar hates in dollars. 1 penny given to your bank at the day of Jesus' birth would over overvalue all existing money, virtual or real, in the world, I've been told. So runs Moore's law for the silicon technology. And up to now, up to 2010, the law has proved true, incredibly enough. And this incredible increment in computer power is unique among industries. Some funny engineer has made up a calculation. If cars, since the day or year of their invention, would follow Moore's law, would have followed Moore's law, cars would be cheaper than a penny and run faster than planes or rockets even. And so you see, normally industrial products have a quality of a quantity of like this, or even like this. They come up and have reach a stable state. Of demand, and then the demand either stays on or the demand decays to zero. My suspicion for this, for the inherent grounds, reasons of this singularity of computer industry is that all the arguments I have given you before, the intricate connection between research and engineering and solid state physics and computer layout and development and miniaturization, naturally. I could go at length in this more technical aspect. Computers started, for instance, with a data width of 4 data, and then they became the buses, the data buses became 8 bits wide, and then 16 bits wide, and 32 and 64 and so on and so on. And you see the same exponential growth to power x, yeah, where the variable is in the power and not in the basis of the function. The function this function would behave rather modest in comparison. It would look like this, yeah, and not jump out of my paper, my available paper. So what remains to say is has to be more ontological once again. For me, it's an open but fascinating question to compare this growth or this speed of computer development with the speed of human development on the scale of a single person and on the scale of a culture, and finally to compare computer development with biologic development. I know nothing about anorganic development in the universe. And we all know that biological development measures in billions of years, probably, or in many millions of years, about 500 or so million. And that the development in lifetime of cultures develops in 800 or 1,000 years, 2,000 years. It's in this. We can only measure it, in fact, by decimal decades. We can say cultures are in the decimal decade 3, from 1,000 to almost 100,000 or so, and biological life in dimensions of 10 power 6 or 7 or 8, and individual life is in the first decade, power 1. Our life has 70 years, and in happy cases it can reach even 80 years. This is a line from the Old Testament. And computers live in the decade 0, 18 years, 18 months is a little bit more than 1 year, and 1 year is 10 power 0. This is for the first time that I make this decadic, this power 10 arbitration, rough arbitration of the world, the living world. And it's just improvised, and I'm rather happy that some God gave it into my brain. So now I've become more comprehensible thanks to your smiles and interests, you see. And I think we have, in our ethics, we have to come up, or to live up to this trinity of life, of animals and humans and computers. And I skip the order of my notes. And try to explain by quoting Professor Bentley, London, computer scientist, why so many people don't accept computers as living beings, in a very broad sense of life, I confess. And this, in the city of Linz on the Danube in Austria, in the wonderful Ars Electronica. Every year it takes place, you know. And we had to give lectures, Bentley and myself and others, and Bentley's, and I'm famous or infamous because I almost never uses, I don't use the beamer, and Bentley was quite different from me, and the beamer beamed some pictures come back too. And he started, it's probably a good end for before the noon break, high noon break. He started his lecture by comparing William Gates to the Christian God. Because in Bentley's impression at least, Gates regarded computers and programmers and people from the highest point of view, top down. And Gates, created the computer world out of nothing. I'm just quoting by memory, not by written text. And so he built up Microsoft Corporation with sub-presidents and sub-sub-presidents and sub-sub-sub and so on, and on a hierarchical level, like the medieval hierarchies of the angels, from the cherubim to the last little angel in helping the soul of a small baby. and at the end, Gate had to create some positions as programmer slaves. This is a current expression in computer commercial, in the computer commercial world. The real work is made by programmers that are treated as slaves or treated as oranges. They are engaged for 3 years and then they are pressed out for 3 years and then they go into the ashtray also. Or as millionaires, usually, but burned out, exhausted. And this top-down hierarchical structure reflects itself in the fact that the factual programmers are heavily separated, isolated from each other. All the self-contradictions in Microsoft Windows and the bugs are the result of this isolation of the armies of slaves. Little small teams of slaves, in fact. And then the beamer went on, and this saw a very a picture, obviously some Röntgen, X-ray picture also, or computer tomograph. I wouldn't tell. It was, I couldn't recognize anything, and Bentley said simply, I'd like to abolish the Christian God and Gates at the same time, and that's why I propose in the following bottom-up approach to computer science. And the little unrecognizable thing showed a little growth. It became a little bit bigger and shaped and almost took a form. And the bottom-up computers were forgotten for the moment in the lecture of Bentley, and suddenly we recognized an embryo, and let's say 9 takes for 9 months of the embryo's development, and then Bentley concluded by saying every mother holds and keeps her child for some time, for 9 months in the human case, and then the mother, in the ideal case, gives this baby, him or her, the freedom of moving alone and moving away and making experiences with the world and learning from elder people. So input should be specified in low-level computers, and input for the computer's eyes and the computer's ears, but also little feet and little arms and little ways to touch the world and to feel pain when hitting too hard to a stone, and learning not just by divine programmers like Gates, but improve its own primitive program by experiences. An very old idea expressed by Alan Turing himself in the late 40s. Computers should make experience just as students or scholars. But in Turing's model, this was an English public school with boing, 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 and in Bentley's model, by the teacher's side, and Turing was right. And in Bentley's case, it was a tender, loving mother without boing, boing, boing. And you know as well as Bentley as me that not all mothers give their child with this freedom. Yeah. This was the end of the story.